welcome to Horology Biology. If you're new to the channel, I'm super happy that you're here, and of course, welcome back to all the original subscribers to the channel. On today's video, I have got an Omega Seamaster calendar with a 353 bumper movement inside. These bumper movements are super fresh, and you're going to see exactly why. I'm going to strip this watch down, I'm going to clean everything, I'm going to rebuild it, and I'm going to explain exactly why this watch doesn't belong to me. It actually belongs to you.
Super fresh, super nice, HB goodness.
Hey guys, so let's get on with the full strip down of this Omega Seamaster calendar watch. Really beautiful looking watch actually, and I really like the way that it's got that date at 6 o'clock. I'm not a massive fan of dates, as you guys probably already know, so to have it at 6 o'clock is just a nice little difference than having it at 3 o'clock, which is boring and not fresh. No, tired. Look at the movement, guys. This watch dates to 1952 according to that 13 serial number. And as you can see, it's a bumper movement, which are a little bit different to the traditional rotors that we're used to nowadays. This is a rotor that does not turn a full circle. It will basically just do half of the movement. And also to take note of this, that it will only wind the watch in one direction. It's not a bi-directional rotor. It'll only wind it in one direction. So like I said, I'm going to fully strip this nice, beautiful looking watch down, and we're going to tackle with the automatic works first, of course, on this. So first of all, remove this bridge held in with 2 screws for the automatic works. Give it a little inspection, check the jewels, make sure everything's looking kosher, and then we can continue. Now, these are the 2 springs that are hidden, and you don't actually see these. So when the rotor is going backwards and forwards on your wrist, it actually bounces off of these springs, hence the terminology of bumper, and that's the name that it gets it from. Really nice movements to work on. Quite a simplistic design, but it really worked for the time, and it's quite revolutionary, obviously, for when they first came out with these. Obviously not something that's used nowadays because we've moved on with technology, but for the day that this came out in the 1950s, beautiful design. So just breaking down this automatic works, as you can see, I've removed the main wheel for that, and I'm also removing this click, which basically holds on that special wheel the charge in place. Stops it going back on itself, basically. It's actually a snapback case, fully waterproof, they claim. It is quite a tough one to open. You need a case knife for that, and obviously you can get in there and remove it. And the gasket for it is actually on the inside of the case back as well. So when you do replace it and you basically put a new one in, it actually sits on the inside of the case back, not on the inside of the case like a lot of watches do. Now, being obviously a vintage Omega, a fan obviously like you guys know I am, and as well as a vintage Enica fan, I really do like these movements and the quality that they actually transmit. I mean, the color of it obviously is really nice. You got that nice bronzy looking movement. The metal looks really nice, and it's just an absolute joy to work on. Now, the other thing about this watch is the dial. You guys are going to see this. This is not a beaten up dial. This is a really nice looking original dial with the date at 6 o'clock, as you can see. You got those dolphin hands, and it just looks really nice. Big Omega logo on there. Traditional for back in the day, and all the lettering is completely intact. And like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, this watch doesn't belong to me. This watch actually belongs to one of you. I just don't know who it is yet, but we're going to touch on that later on, so stay tuned. So the dial feet have been loosened by the dial feet screws obviously, and I'm just working off the dial, and I'm going to put this away somewhere safe because the condition of that dial is just super nice, as you can see. Beautiful sunburst looking dial, and it really pops on this watch. Now underneath you got a very basic date mechanism. Now, one thing to add about this, okay, let me explain the situation. It's a calendar watch and is actually advertised as a calendar, but for some bizarre reason obviously on this, because it hadn't been obviously invented yet, it doesn't have any kind of quick set mechanism in regards to the date change. But it does with a little bit of a difference, even though I must admit I don't like it. So on many automatic watches, you can do a quick set, as in like pull or push of the crown, or you can basically move between 8 and midnight and back and forwards to move the date forward. With the Seamaster Calendar Edition, it simply doesn't work like that because it's, well, to put it mildly, a little bit more primitive. The way that you can quick set this is if you turn the hands all the way anti-clockwise, the date will go backwards every 24-hour turn. And if you do it the other way, it will go forwards every 24-hour turn. So basically the idea of it is, if you say picked up this watch and it was on the 15th of the month, and the date of today's day was say like the 13th, you would basically, instead of going all the way forward around past the 20s, etc., etc., you could wind the mechanism backwards to go to 14 and then go to 13. So it was like a quick set, but yeah, in my opinion, not a very good one, but it was what it was for back in the day. Now you can actually see as well that this has got the original Breguet hairspring on this as well, and this is one that I do not want to mess up. They are an absolute pain in the ass to work with. They're not as flexible as modern hairsprings, I should say, not mainsprings, hairsprings. You can adjust them obviously, but they're not as forgiving as a new hairspring. The metal is a lot more tough, and you can actually snap them very easily trying to make adjustments. So if there's not a problem with it, treat it with care, as this one is, and it'll be good to go obviously after the wash. So removing the pallet bridge and obviously removing the pallets, and of course I've taken all of the wind out of the watch. Not like some people that I've seen in some of those videos that I've been reacting to. It's not fresh. You gotta make sure that you remove all the charge out of your watch before you remove the pallets. Otherwise it's just gonna make an obscene noise and wind down, and that's not cool. You can actually do damage to your watch doing that as well. So I'm continuing to break down this smaller automatic bridge that lived underneath. There's actually 3 bridges with this, if you think about it, before you're actually getting to the trainer wheels bridge. It's crazy when you think about it. And underneath you can actually see the mechanism starting to take shape. On one of the wheels you've got an extended pivot, which obviously has got this wheel sitting onto it, and then you've got this long extended center pivot for the sweeper. It's not basically like a modern watch, let's say, where the design obviously on this is very different to what you're used to seeing. And as far as I've seen, there's not that many bumper videos out there on YouTube, so I think it's kind of nice to do a video like this and actually show one actually getting serviced, so we can see what the mechanism looks like altogether. So removing the ratchet wheel, and then I'm going to remove the crown wheel and the crown of wheel core. I actually could see straight away as well that one of the screws for the crown wheel is not original. Whoever's worked on this has obviously used what they had at the time to replace it, so that screw I'm pointing to right now is not original. It's functional, so I'm going to leave it as it is. I simply do not have screws that are for this movement, or as far as I know I don't. So if it works, and it does work, I'm just going to leave it as it is. So off comes the crown wheel, and then the crown wheel core, which lives in the middle obviously, as you can see, held in with those 2 screws. And then I can remove the click, and then also the click spring. And it's got a really, really tiny little click spring on this. It's not a big one. No sir. It's a little small one, and you got to be careful with it because it's one of those flying ones as well. And it's that small that seriously, if it's shot across the room, you ain't never going to find this one again. And I certainly don't want to have to buy one. So now that that extra wheel has been removed, and also the pinions, I am now going to remove the trainer wheel bridge and also the barrel bridge. So this is held in with the 2 screws. It's actually 3 screws, because if you see the 3rd screw at the bottom, it's actually a really extended long screw, and it connects both bridges with 1 screw from the bridge that I just removed prior. So easing it off gently, and underneath obviously I'm going to have the trainer wheels. The other thing that I really like about these bumper movements, it's kind of like, how do I say it? It feels like you're working on a movement that's actually on a plate, so to speak, because you've got this such a large circumference area of nothing, let's say, where the movement's in the middle and everything's kind of protected. So it actually feels like it's a little bit safer to work on than some other movements which are literally right on the edge of your movement holder. So remove the trainer wheels, apart from that center wheel, because I need to remove the cannon pinion from the other side, so obviously that one's still not going to move yet. And I can now remove the barrel bridge. Quick inspection, and underneath you have got the mainspring barrel with the arbor inside, and obviously the mainspring. I'm just going to nudge him out of the way and put him to one side, and I'll crack that open later on. A lot of oil on there though. A lot of loose oil, not fresh. But to be honest, I'd rather have too much oil on a watch that needs servicing rather than no oil at all and copious amounts of rust, because that's not cool and certainly not a pleasure to work on. So just removing that date wheel spring, a really large one as well, as you can see. And then also this date wheel, I cannot remember the correct name of it, but that's basically the wheel that's going to nudge over the numbered date wheel every 24 hours. So now I can take off the cannon pinion, and then you'll see that the center wheel will just drop underneath. And then I can tackle the keyless works and the setting lever spring. And underneath that, of course, you have got the minute wheel, and you got the intermediate wheel, you've got the rest of the keyless works, the yoke spring, the winding pinion, the sliding pinion, all the families under there. And I have to say the movement is in pretty good condition. It's quite dry in numerous places, but then there's certain areas where there's a hell of a lot of oil, like far too much. And again, like I said, I'd rather have too much oil, which is a little bit more of a pain to clean, but it does actually help with, if it's really over the top lubricated, the corrosion obviously is not going to be there, so that's a good thing really. Makes it a little bit easier. So I've just popped out the setting lever screw, and then the setting lever underneath, he just falls out. So now obviously I'm just going to peg all of these jewels out with some pegwood, make sure that all the old oil is cleaned away. I also always touch it up with a bit of Rodico as well. Now I can pop the balance back on, and that's what I mean about this bridge. As you can see, it's clearly got a lot of room to work on, which is really nice. So I'm just going to pop him back on, make sure he's engaged correctly, and now I can tackle the mainspring, crack open the barrel, remove the lid, and as you can see, there is a hell of a lot of grease in there. So much grease. Take out the old spring. I will of course give that a full wash as well. And everything's getting prepped, ready for the cleaning machine, just pegging out some last stuff and pre-cleaning, and we're good to go. So as I mentioned, guys, I am actually going to give away this watch. I'm going to be advertising this in videos moving forward, and this is going to be my 10,000 subscriber giveaway. All you got to do is like the video, subscribe, and that's it. And you're in with a shot of potentially winning this watch. There's no catches, there's nothing about it at all. It's just basically me growing my channel and giving a thank you back to you guys for supporting it for all the time that I've had this channel going on. So like I said, once we hit that 10K, which is not unrealistic at the end of the day, I am going to be giving this watch away completely free, shipped to any subscriber out there. And it's a really nice watch, like I said. I've put a value on it of around, what, 700, 750 euros. And I think it's perfectly nice for somebody to have in their collection. So of course now we can rebuild this watch. Everything's come out of the cleaning machine. All the ELMA products have got in deep on all of these parts, giving everything a good clean. And I'm just basically putting some chrono grease into this barrel bridge. Sorry, into this mainspring barrel so that I can put in the mainspring. He clicks in obviously with those mainspring winders. They really help obviously, as you can see. And I've just popped in the arbor, and then I'm just going to give it a little bit of lubrication with some 1300 before I put the lid back on. And once I've done that, I will just basically put that aside until later on, until we need him. On goes the lid, and then as you can see with this little tool, just press fits on, and it helps basically do it flat as possible so that you're not going to bend it in any way. Because these metal pieces are delicate at the end of the day. And like I said, I will just pop that to one side. So now of course we can tackle the capstone jewels. We need to clean these, we need to take the capstones off, and what we need to do is we use a little bit of fix-a-drop, which will help the oil not disperse, and then I can re-oil them and pop them back. There's one on the top and one on the bottom, and the principle is basically exactly the same for both. And as you can see, I'm getting a lot more close-up shots now because of this new camera. It really makes a big difference, guys. So finally you can see. So a simple drop of 90-10 is enough. You don't want to put on too much, and then you simply just put the capstones together. It will suck itself in place with the oil, and what you're looking for is a nice circle of oil in the middle, which is exactly what we have got. Super nice. Popping back on, close the inkle block setting, and repeat the process on the other side. Now what I always do afterwards, don't show it on videos obviously, but once I've done both of the capstones and I've got the balance on there fine, I just give it a little blow with my blower, and I'm basically timing to see how long it takes to come to a standstill. And I was told that as long as you can get over 1 minute, you're pretty much good to go, to show that there's not really any friction. But with this, it was still going for nearly 2 minutes. Like, seriously, it was ridiculous. But that's obviously a really good sign. So like I said, process is exactly the same on the reverse side, on the dial side, and you basically just pop those back in place. Some people do this at the end. Some people also take out these cleaning. I do it afterwards. But what I do is I fixer drop the top capstone, and then the bottom piece, I give it a treatment in one dip, and then I let it dry, and then I put it back together. So that's the balance completely dealt with now. I'm going to pop that to one side. Keep it safe, obviously, because I told you about that damn hairspring. You don't want to mess that hairspring up, not an old Breguet one. They are very delicate. And you can tell that the old ones, when they're more of the metal is like a blue color. So rebuilding the watch, in goes the mainspring barrel, and I'm also putting in the setting lever screw. A little bit of 1300 to the top of the arbor. And then I can start building up the train of wheels. And they just fit like a glove, as you can see. It's really nice. You've got a set of 4, and then obviously you've got that other wheel as well, which will live on top of the train of wheels bridge on that extended pivot. And that's also just friction fit. So on goes the train of wheel bridge. Make sure that your pivots are all engaged into the correct jewel holes, and check it before you screw it on. And this is really nice and loose to touch, which is a really nice sight. I'm very happy to see that. And again, this is just held on with the 2 screws, and not the 3 now, because like I said, there's an extended screw for the right side of that bridge. And that goes on later when we put the additional bridge on. It's bridge after bridge on this watch. So on goes the click and the click spring and the click. And that's just held in with the 1 screw. Just making sure that the spring is engaged, and then I can pop on the ratchet wheel as well. So guys, if you're enjoying this video, I'd super appreciate it if you could hit a like on it. You can also subscribe to the HB channel as well. If you do subscribe, of course, you're going to find out when all the next super fresh, super nice HB goodness is going to drop. And if you check your bell notifications for YouTube, then you're going to basically get notified when my new videos come out as well. Helps the channel, helps me with that cursed algorithm from YouTube, which is a little bit tedious at times, but it is what it is. But let me know what you guys are thinking to this new camera that I got, because I'm really liking these close-up shots now. So just put in the crown wheel and the crown wheel core, and now I'm just oiling up the jewels. Using Mobius 9010 on these trains, and on the center wheel I also use a little bit of 1300. And as you can see, that's that extended pivot. and that jewel also gets oiled. You can actually see that I do not add a lot of oil at all. Just because a jewel is like a well, let's say, it doesn't mean that you have to fill it, you know. I was always told when it comes to oiling, less is more. Seriously, if you can pretty much see what you've put in too much. So I just added a little bit of grease to the pivot, and now I'm obviously adding on the cannon pinion. It's also friction fit as well. Now adding on the setting lever. Now these old Omega setting levers are a little bit interesting as well. They're like some kind of hybrid version. So it's a screw, but even though it's a screw, once you've unscrewed it a little bit, you still need to push it down with your screwdriver in order to release the winding stem. So added on a little bit of grease to the winding pinion, and now I'm going to pop in the sliding pinion as well. And then I'll add a little bit of grease in the center of that as well, so for where the yoke will sit. Just obviously checking that everything's engaged before I can put on the yoke. Doing some additional oiling as well for where everything else is going to live. Using 1300 on these posts. And in goes the yoke. So on goes the minute wheel. I always advise as well to put the cannon pinion on first. The reason being is it's something that can be pushed down. It can be quite violent when it pushes all the way down. And if your minute wheel is already on, well, there's a high probability that you're not going to have the teeth aligned, and you could potentially damage one of your minute wheel teeth when you're pushing that cannon pinion down. So it's always best to put the cannon pinion on first, so that when you put your minute wheel on, you can just align it nice and easy, no stress, and you're good to go. So just finishing up the keyless works, and I'm just adding on the setting lever spring. That's held in with the two screws, as you can see. Always use a little bit of pegwood as well, just to keep things engaged. And then I can fully screw it down. Check that everything works. And then using some Rodico, just cleaning up my mess. Any excess grease that you've used, you want to basically clean that up, because it's a freshly serviced watch and you don't want to leave a mess. No, sir. You need to clean up your house. So just fit in this really long date changing spring, which is huge. It's got two little posts underneath it. And then it's got a single screw, as you can see. And now this date changing wheel, held in with 3 screws, maybe a little bit excessive to have 3, but it has a core as well to it, as you can see. Quite similar to a crown wheel setup. And I added a little bit of 1300 as well to the inside circle edges to that. So now just adding in this little brass spacer, which the date wheel is going to live on top. You can see when you're looking at this date wheel, it is very old. I mean, the condition of it's not bad actually. It's got a little bit of yellowy tarnishing to it, but the condition overall, it's not bad. And then it's got this really excessive ring which holds it in place with 6 screws, which I find a little bit over the top. Boy, do they not want it to go anywhere. Now, one of the screws was actually missing, and I don't have a replacement, so it worked before, so there's no reason why it shouldn't work again with 5 instead of 6. So I'm just putting them back where they originally came from. Checking that it engages, and it does. Putting in that small bridge where the springs live for the automatic bumper. And that literally just clicks in place. And now I can tackle the pallet forks. So I'm giving them just a dip in, 1 dip to clean them. I do not put pallet forks through the cleaning machine. They are far too delicate for that. They also have shellac on there as well, which holds the pallet stones in place. And there is a very, very high chance that if you are going to basically run those through a cleaning machine, all that shellac is just going to fall out basically, and then you're going to have to do it all over again. So once that's done, I also put it in some fix-a-drop treatment, and as you could see just before, with a little bit of softwood, I also remove any of the residue from fix-a-drop off of the pivots, just because it could potentially add some additional friction, and you don't want that. So once it's engaged, I can basically screw the bridge, held in with the 2 screws as you can see, and then I can actually oil it as well. So as you can see, I am just oiling the exit stone. You only need a tiny little bit, and then what I do is I basically will move the pallet forks 5 times, and I will repeat the process another 2 times. And what you're doing is you want to just make sure that every tooth of the escape wheel is basically getting some very small lubrication. So adding on this additional wheel, which is again going to drive the center post where the sweeper is connected to. And that's just friction fit like a hand basically, so I'm just using a hand press tool to engage that. And then I can put back the balance on. Oh, and he fires up straight away, no messing around, which is really nice to see. No overbanking, just straight fired and good to go. Super fresh. So just adding on now a little friction spring. Which is also held in with a super microscopic screw. And now I can slide him in. It's really important that you take care of these parts as well, because they're so fine, and the last thing you want to do is bend that. So he will go all the way through, straight through the cannon pinion as well. And like I said, your seconds hand will connect to it. There is a small bridge as well that will hold it in place. And again, be very careful while installing this, because it has got such a delicate pivot on the edge, on the end of it, sorry, and it's something obviously that you do not want to break. Held in with the 1 screw. And now I can tackle the automatic works. So popping on this bridge, which the automatic works will build up on top of. And that's that extended screw that I was talking about. So it's just the 1 screw, and that goes all the way into the train of wheels bridge as well. Popping back in the bumper springs, which again is why you get the name from the rotor, because as it spins around, it will bounce off of these springs. Little 1300 here to this reversing wheel, I believe. And I fully stripped this down so that I can clean it. I didn't take the spring off of it because it is so delicate, and to be honest, I don't think there's any need. It has a little click on the side of it that you can see, so you need to have this engage into this wheel. And as you can see, the teeth on the wheel, they all bend in just one direction. Now, another thing to note as well, it's not the first time that I've worked on one of these movements, but I do remember the first time I worked on one. When you put in the automatic works back and you're connecting the rotor back to engage with the teeth off of the bridge of this wheel, you need to make sure that you do it in one particular place only. It will fit in any way, but if you don't align it to the opposite end of each other, so to speak, with the teeth, your rotor will not do a full correct turn. It will only go halfway of what it only does, sorry. And I remember the first time I ever did it, I was a little bit stumped by this, and then I eventually worked it out. And now, of course, I mean, it's just in my head, so I remember. But that's just a little bit of advice with this. When you're putting it back, you have to have it towards the back end of the last 2 teeth. If you just put it on in the middle, you're not going to get a full rotation from the rotor. So just building up the rotor, and it's held in with 3 screws. Annoyingly, they do it this way around, not on the underneath. So that's why I'm holding it with a pair of tweezers so that I can get these screws in correctly. Just adding a little 1300 to this jewel of where the end of the rotor is going to go. And this is what I'm talking about, just making sure that those teeth are aligning right at the last 2 teeth. Not the last one, but the second to last one. And then I can just pop on the automatic bridge, making sure that everything engages. It's held in with 2 very thin screws actually. You can see how thin these guys are. They're pretty long, but they're very thin. So a little bit of pressure on the bridge just while I'm keeping everything engaged, and then I can just nip up these 2 screws. So just checking it's working, and as you can see it is engaging correctly. It only winds the watch up in one direction, and that is correct. So movement's pretty much sorted out, so now we just need to basically install these hands and get this watch cased up and we're good to go. So I've made sure that the date is snapped over obviously for 12 o'clock, and I'm putting on the hour hand. Friction fit like any hands. Just want to give it a good check, obviously, make sure that it's not engaging with anything on the dial, because that logo also raises a little bit. So you need to make sure that you're a little bit above that as well. So just popping on the minute hand now as well. He's looking pretty good. Again, just checking for clearance, making sure that everything is engaging correctly and nothing's hitting each other. And then last but not least, I can just add on this seconds hand. Now sometimes these can be a little bit troublesome to fit because there's a little bit of give from the friction spring underneath. So what I'm trying to say is if you're pushing on it too much, you can actually push it down, and that's something that you certainly don't want to do. So just casing up the watch now, we got the hands on, we got the dial, we got the movement fully rebuilt. It's looking super nice. And we got to just put in the movement screws and movement holder screws. There's only one on this watch on the bumpers. They do only have one because there's a little notch on the other side of the movement where it fits into the case. So they only need one basically, which is nice. Adding some grease to the winding stem. I always do this right at the end. I never do it during the rebuild. It's always the last thing that I do. Quite simply because I take it out a few times, and obviously you need to have it out right at the end in order to fit the watch into the movement, to fit the movement into the watch case. So again, just nipping that up and making sure it's engaged, and now I can grease up a gasket. And again, like I mentioned earlier, these gaskets actually go on the inside of the case back. There's a little groove where it fits underneath, and it hugs up against the sides, let's say. And it's a snapback case, so that just clicks back on. You don't need a special tool for that. It'll be enough that you can do it with your hands. And now I can put the strap on. It's got a nice brown leather strap on this, and there is an Omega stainless steel buckle on the end of it as well. So there we have it, guys. The Omega Seamaster Calendar from 1952 with caliber 353 inside. Full stainless steel case, 17 jeweled, and it's an automatic bumper. These are really nice to have in your collection. And like I said, this is going to be the 10K Grow the Channel watch. I will 100% give this watch away for completely free to one of the subscribers of the channel. And all you need to do is just like and subscribe. That's it. Guys, as always, till next time.